Spyro wandered through the large hallways of the temple. It had been a busy day. He had spent the afternoon with his brother Sparks and new friend Cinder. They played games like hide and seek and chatted for hours on end about anything they could think of. It had been a few days since Spyro had rescued Cinder from her corrupted form, created by the Dark Master. Throughout the day, Spyro could tell it would be a long time until Cinder would fully recover from all she had suffered. Now, it was night time, and all of the temple's residents had gone to their respective places to sleep. All, that is, except Spyro. Sleep was something that didn't come easily to the Purple Dragon. Ever since escaping Convexity, he had been having nightmares that he did not understand. He would keep seeing a mountain with strange green liquids streaming down like blood in veins, and surrounding this monstrous sight were dark, shadowy creatures. Was it all related to the Dark Master? He wasn't sure, but what he was sure about is that he had no interest in sleeping, at least not yet. Despite knowing some areas of the temple, like the statue and the Pool of Visions, Spyro had not become entirely familiar with his new home. And so, bored and unable to rest, he decided to explore and try to learn his way around. The temple showed signs of decay and disrepair ever since it was attacked, but most of it still stood strong and proud. Spyro remembered when he first saw the temple, along with meeting Ignitus, the elder fire dragon. It was nothing like the mossy brown swamp he had grown up in. He thought back to that day, when he had felt excited and intrigued, but he also remembered feeling scared as he learned more and more about the world around him, and the big part he would play in it. How he would play that part was a mystery. Spyro snapped out of his thoughts as he fell to the ground. He had tripped on a slab of stone, likely a part of the ceiling, and was now wincing from the shock. He slowly stood up and looked back the way he came. He wasn't sure how Ignitus or the other Guardians would react seeing him up at this hour, but he would prefer not to find out. He stood there, not making a single sound. A minute passed, and no one had come after him. Sighing in relief, Spyro continued down the hallway, this time watching his surroundings more closely for any more trip-ups. Eventually, the hallway came to an end, and in front of Spyro stood a large wooden door. It looked just like the other ones in the temple, but unlike those ones, it was almost completely rotten. Spyro slowly walked up to it and gave it a small push. It creaked as it moved, making the little dragon look back down the hallway. But once again, no one could be heard. Turning back to the door, Spyro pushed it a little further, until there was just enough room for him to fit in. Once he was through, he surveyed his surroundings. He was now in a large circular room, with mossy walls, flags showing images of various types of dragons, and a giant window in the ceiling, providing light from the moon above. It was, however, the bits of straw scattered across the floor that had Spyro's attention the most. He could see it everywhere he looked. As he gently walked across the room, he could make out a long pile of straw up against the wall.
What is this?
As he got closer, he could then see small objects on the straw surface. Even with the moonlight, most of the room was still shrouded in darkness. It was only when Spyro reached out and touched one of the objects that he finally realized what they were. They were the remains of dragon eggs, ones that were smashed before they could hatch. Spyro stood back in shock as soon as it hit him. He had walked into a grotto, one that had been attacked, most likely on the same night the Dark Army had invaded, the same night Ignitus took him to the swamp before he was born, the same night Cinder had been taken. All these dragons gone long before they had a chance to grow. Spyro breathed heavily as he began to feel sick. He agreed to himself that he had enough exploring for one night and quickly headed back towards the door. He took a few steps and then froze. He began to hear a strange whispering sound.
Oh God.
He turned back and scanned the entire room, but there was no one in here. Then, among the whispering, he could make out the sound of whimpering, and it was coming from behind him. Spyro turned around and stared in horror. In front of him stood a small glowing dragon, looking directly at him while whimpering quietly. She didn't say anything. Spyro wasn't sure, but he thought he could see a burning hatred in her eyes. He was about to speak, but then a number of ghostly shapes flew past him, catching the purple dragon off guard. As he looked around, he could see other dragons now, some on the floor while others flying around him. Some were looking around the room, sad and tearful, and others were staring directly at Spyro, angry and threatening. He could hear raised voices now, all lunging into his mind as if they were spears. Spyro was close to tears. He curled up on the floor and shut his eyes tight.
Go away! Leave me alone! Please!
But it didn't end. Like a tornado, they swirled around him, entrapping him and showing no signs of releasing him.
Where's my mommy and daddy?
Spyro!
Spyro slowly opened his eyes at the sound of the door opening and that familiar voice. When he looked up, there was Ignitus, standing at the doorway, a look of concern on his face. Spyro's eyes darted all over the room, but there was no one else there. The dragons had disappeared, and the whispering had ended. It was just him and Ignitus. The Guardian walked over to the little dragon, who was still curled up.
Are you alright? What happened?
Spyro slowly stood up, but didn't say anything. He was shivering violently and had wide eyes showing nothing but fear as he continuously looked all around him. Ignitus then noticed a straw all over the floor, and towards the wall scattered remains of destroyed dragon eggs. It was indeed a disturbing sight, but he didn't think Spyro would be that scared. Then something caught his attention. A pair of eyes in the darkest corner of the room, staring directly at the purple dragon. A look of anger.
Avenge us.
Spyro saw them too, and immediately charged towards Ignitus and clutched his chest for protection. Ignitus began to put the pieces together. Slowly, he held the dragon tightly against him.
I'm sorry, Spyro. You should never have had to see this.
In his whimpering, Spyro tried to respond.
I'm sorry. I should never.
It's alright, young dragon.
The two dragons stood there in their embrace for some time, until eventually Ignitus released Spyro, who had now calmed down and was breathing gently.
Come along. It's time you had some much needed rest.
Spyro couldn't agree more. They walked towards the door, and once they were through, Spyro took one last look at the room before Ignitus pushed the door shut. Spyro didn't fully know what he had seen in there, or what it all meant, but truthfully, he'd prefer not to find out. The purple dragon sighed as he turned away from the door and followed Ignitus down the hallway.